When you hear about Soviet architecture, the first thing that probably comes to mind is endless rows of identical grey concrete boxes, primarily Khrushchevkas. However, in Soviet cities, there are buildings that completely defy this stereotype. These are houses with high ceilings, richly decorated facades, and even elements of classical architecture. Such houses are called Stalinkas, and they are still considered the most prestigious and desirable housing in Moscow, Riga, Tbilisi, and other cities of the former USSR. Today, we'll explore what a Stalinka is, why these buildings are so different from the typical Soviet panel blocks, who lived in them, and why they still generate so much debate and admiration. To understand why Stalinkas were needed at all, it's important to imagine what life looked like in Soviet cities before the 1930s. Before the October Revolution of 1917, most urban residents in Russia rented housing in so-called profitable houses, apartment buildings constructed specifically for rental purposes. The owners of these buildings could be merchants, aristocrats, monasteries, educational institutions, and other private individuals. In 1917, about 80% of buildings in St. Petersburg were profitable houses. In one such building, people of different means could live. On the lower, prestigious floors with high ceilings and molding lived wealthy merchants and industrialists. Slightly higher, doctors, officials, professors, and on the upper floors, students and workers, sometimes even renting beds in shifts. This is exactly how, for example, Fyodor Dostoevsky's literary character Rodion Raskolnikov lived. Overall, the pre-revolutionary city was very socially mixed. Luxury and poverty literally coexisted under one roof. After the 1917 revolution, everything changed radically. Private property ownership was abolished. Houses and apartments became state property, and their distribution was handled by local councils. The authorities introduced sanitary norms of 9 square meters per person, and anything exceeding this maximum was considered surplus and subject to confiscation or the settlement of new tenants. Mass compaction began. Working families were moved into apartments of former owners and sometimes entire collectives. The authorities gave 2 weeks to find neighbors voluntarily, otherwise the settlement was forced. For example, before the revolution, the family of manufacturer Ilya Pigit lived in one of the luxurious 10-room apartments on Bolshaya Sadovaya in Moscow. After the revolution and the introduction of the Compaction policy, everything changed. In 1924, 14 people already lived in this apartment, and by 1940, more than 35 spacious apartments turned into communal housing, where a separate family lived in each room. But all these changes were driven not only by ideology, but also by urgent necessity. During the 1920s to 1930s, millions of people abandoned rural areas and migrated en masse to cities. The reasons were numerous: industrialization, collectivization, the consolidation of private peasant farms into collective farms, famine, and an overall deterioration of rural living conditions. Within a single decade, from 1926 to 1939, the urban population share jumped from 18% to nearly 30%, the most dramatic urbanization in Russian history. When it became apparent that existing housing stock couldn't accommodate this massive influx of new urban residents, Soviet leadership decided to construct entirely new types of buildings. This marked the beginning of the Stalinka era in the 1930s. Buildings designed not only to address the housing crisis, but also to demonstrate to the world that Soviet power could create architecture that was both beautiful and grand in scale. Stalinkas always held a special place in the Soviet consciousness and represented the ultimate aspiration for many. But dreams were one thing, reality was far more complex. Not all Stalinkas were palatial homes with fireplaces and parquet floors. During 3 decades of construction, from the 1930s through the early 1960s, vastly different types of these buildings emerged. Let's begin with the most basic: workers' Stalinkas, low-rise buildings in industrial settlements and suburban areas. These were 2- and 3-story structures built from brick, cinder blocks, and sometimes wood. While this may sound modest, for working families transitioning from barracks or rural cottages, it represented genuine progress. a private apartment with running water and plumbing. After the war, such buildings were constructed on a massive scale with German prisoner of war labor, earning them the popular nickname German houses. They went up quickly using straightforward construction methods, yet provided homes for thousands of young professionals, construction workers, and factory employees. But the backbone of Stalin's housing program consisted of standard Stalinkas, residences for the Soviet middle class. These were built throughout the country for engineers, doctors, teachers, skilled laborers, and mid-level party functionaries. The apartments were quite respectable, 2 to 3 rooms with separate kitchens and often balconies or loggias. Walls nearly half a meter thick ensured excellent insulation from both noise and temperature. The facades featured restrained decoration, classical proportions, high-quality stucco, and occasionally understated molding. The challenge was insufficient supply. There simply weren't enough units for everyone, necessitating communal living arrangements where multiple families shared a single apartment. Even so, securing a room in a Stalin-era communal flat was considered fortunate compared to barracks living. The pinnacle of Stalin-era architecture was the Nomenclature Stalinkas, residences for the party elite in prime urban locations. These were constructed along major boulevards and central squares for ministers, generals, industrial directors, celebrated artists, and prominent scientists. The apartments were breathtaking in scale. 3 to 5 rooms with soaring 4-meter ceilings, formal dining rooms, generous kitchens, storage areas, and sometimes even staff quarters and workshops. Premium materials were standard: hardwood parquet, marble fixtures, and top-quality plumbing. The facades were lavishly appointed with ornate molding, columns, bas-reliefs, and occasional sculptural elements. Building entrances featured grand natural stone staircases, elevators, doormen, integrated waste disposal systems, and basement bomb shelters. The clear drawback: such residences were available only to a privileged few and cost many times more than standard housing. Stalin's architecture undoubtedly embodied his grandiose ambitions. He believed architecture should inspire pride and convey a sense of greatness and permanence. This is precisely why Stalinkas were built to last centuries, engineered with generous safety margins, constructed from premium materials, and adorned with classical and monumental elements. It was essentially an architectural showcase, proof that Soviet power could create not only functional economical buildings, but also beauty, comfort, and prestige. The famous 7 Stalin skyscrapers, known today as the 7 Sisters, hold a special place in this architectural showcase. Built in Moscow during the late 1940s and early 1950s, Stalin personally oversaw their planning. He envisioned them surpassing American skyscrapers, demonstrating to the world that the USSR could match capitalist construction achievements. The most ambitious project, however, was the planned Palace of Soviets, a colossal 415-meter structure topped by a 100-meter Lenin statue. The Cathedral of Christ the Savior was demolished in 1931 to make way for this building, which was intended to be the world's tallest and serve as a symbol of communist triumph. The project never materialized. First the war intervened, then national priorities shifted. The site eventually became home to the famous Moskva swimming pool, and the cathedral wasn't rebuilt until the 1990s. But who actually inhabited these magnificent buildings with their ornate molding, marble details, and soaring ceilings? Understanding this requires recognizing a key fact. The Soviet Union had no real estate market as we know it. Apartments couldn't be bought or sold. The state controlled all housing allocation. Naturally, the finest apartments in elite Stalinkas were distributed according to rigid hierarchy. At the apex sat party leadership, ministers, generals, secretaries, and heads of major enterprises. Just below came renowned scientists, writers, artists, and distinguished physicians. Next were engineers, university faculty, mid-level military officers, and exceptionally productive Stakhanovite workers. Everyone else came last. An informal space-by-rank system even existed. Generals could expect 4 to 5 rooms, colonels merited 3 to 4, while ordinary engineers might receive a 2-room apartment at best. Remarkably, Even accomplished individuals often waited 10 to 15 years for housing, whereas party officials frequently received immediate allocation through special channels. Most ordinary Soviet families ended up in modest apartments or communal housing, where multiple families shared a single unit, kitchen, and bathroom. This system created a distinct geography of status. Your address and even floor number revealed much about your social standing. Securing housing in city centers or along major thoroughfares was considered extraordinary fortune and a clear mark of success. Stalinkas thus functioned as more than mere housing. They were instruments for distributing prestige and power throughout Soviet society. This era of architectural grandeur ended as abruptly as it had begun. On November 4, 1955, merely 2 years after Stalin's death, the CPSU Central Committee and USSR Council of Ministers issued a resolution on eliminating excesses in design and construction. This single document effectively dismantled the entire Stalin architectural program. The resolution explicitly declared that tower superstructures, numerous decorative colonnades and porticos, and other architectural excesses constituted wasteful spending and sabotage. Beauty was out. Simplicity, austerity of form, and economical solutions were now mandated. Architects who had recently won Stalin prizes for their luxurious designs suddenly found themselves stripped of honors and dismissed from their positions. The driving forces were primarily economic. New Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev confronted a devastating housing crisis. Tens of millions of citizens still lived in barracks, basements, and cramped communal apartments. Meanwhile, elite Stalinkas cost the state 900 to 1200 rubles per square meter, when the average engineer earned only about 800 rubles monthly. Khrushchev established an ambitious target: provide every Soviet family with their own apartment by 1980. Achieving this required rapid, inexpensive mass construction. Ornate Stalinkas, with their decorative details and generous room sizes, were entirely incompatible with this mission. This launched the Khrushchevka era, standardized 5-story panel buildings, constructed across the USSR using identical blueprints. Construction costs plummeted to just 100 to 130 rubles per square meter, 4 to 6 times less than Stalinkas. These units were compact, featuring low ceilings, thin walls, and no elevators or waste chutes. However, they could be built rapidly and in vast numbers, giving countless Soviet families their first private apartment, however modest. Khrushchevkas fundamentally transformed Soviet life, from urban planning principles to domestic routines. How families managed in 4-meter kitchens, and why the micro-district became a new lifestyle model. That's covered in our separate, comprehensive video with many surprising insights. Nearly 70 years after the Stalin era ended, these buildings remain among the most coveted properties on the real estate market. In Moscow, Stalinka apartments can command prices 2 to 3 times higher than modern developments, and prime location is only part of the explanation. Their enduring appeal stems from an exceptional blend of craftsmanship and aesthetics. Stalinkas were genuinely built to last centuries, with substantial structural redundancy. Experts believe they could remain standing another 100 to 150 years. Equally significant is their architectural character. The Stalin Empire style fused Soviet ideology with classical design principles. Roman monumentality, Baroque opulence, and neoclassical restraint combined into a distinctive style meant to showcase Soviet power's magnificence. A remarkable paradox emerged: architecture designed to celebrate communism has outlasted the ideology itself, becoming cherished cultural heritage valued across political divides. The Stalinka story poses a question still relevant today. Should cities prioritize beautiful, enduring buildings for the privileged few, or practical, affordable housing for the masses? Stalin emphasized beauty and prestige. Khrushchev prioritized accessibility and volume. Both strategies had merits and drawbacks. What's your perspective? Share in the comments. How do your countries address this dilemma? Is it worthwhile investing in architecture that will inspire for centuries, or should the priority be sheltering as many people as possible? maybe there's a third option. Share your thoughts below. This has been Julie from Soviet Born Channel. Until next time.